Can you hear me? Okay, yeah, it's working. Hello. A quick introduction about myself. My name is Aparna. I was thinking about kind of words that pop into my mind to best introduce myself today, and these three popped up. Having lived and worked across 7 countries and 6 categories, I thought Explorer kinds of fits. At this point, I've just finished a very exciting stint as the Chief Marketing and Digital Officer of a tea company. Lovely tea brands like LIPTON, PG Tips, perhaps many of you are familiar with, Paka Tea, T2, a lot of amazing tea brands, which takes me to Tea Lover. Obviously, having immersed myself in tea for about 6 years, you'll see a lot of beautiful tea imagery. I promise no tea puns, but a lot of tea stories. When I spoke to the guys at MadFest, Luke kind of asked me to touch upon just the challenges CMOs and heads of marketing and heads of brands face in convincing your CFOs, convincing your CEOs to bring that mindset of constant innovation every day, right? To fight for your budgets, to keep your plans in place. And I thought that's a lovely thing to kind of talk about. I think we all know this, market growth within fast-moving consumer good companies, no matter what category you work in, market growth is what drives that kind of long-term sustainable value. A lot of times, I'm not saying share growth isn't important, it very much is, makes you feel like you're winning, but I think that long-term win comes with driving the category. And I find market growth is very closely linked to innovation and reinvention. Again, innovation is a big word, and sometimes many of us think of innovation as kind of product innovation, putting a new product out there. But I think innovation is a mindset, bringing innovation into media, bringing innovation into the way that we run our teams, bringing innovation into our communication programs is super critical. What I'll do over the next few kind of minutes is talk about a few successes and failures that I've seen and my kind of favorite lessons from them. The first thing I will say is it's really important to find your rhythm. So what do I mean by that? The guys from Kantar talked about kind of that war against boring surveys and kind of finding insights, right? I think it's very important to couple those beautiful, strong human insights with deep introspection about where your organization is. That is the reality. You could have the best idea under the sun, but if your organization isn't running at that pace, isn't built or geared to deliver success to that innovation, you kind of go off kilt. So that rhythm between external insight and internal introspection, super important. That rhythm between marketing and finance, super important. That rhythm between marketing and many other functions like supply chain and procurement within a company, super important. So I kind of find that as much time as we spend finding the right insights from our consumers, which is super important, it's important to kind of really introspect and figure out where your company is. And I'll talk about kind of 3 rhythms today. The first is that rhythm of keep calm and carry on, right? It sounds very simple. A lot of us kind of mistake calmness for inaction or lack of doing things. But I think for big brands, think brands, billion-euro brands, half-a-billion-euro brands, that are looking to kind of keep salient through their life stages, it's very important to look at hard data. So when you talk to your CFOs, your CEOs, really rely on hard data. But the one learning I've had is when you look at data for the core of your portfolio, so big core brands, don't look at monthly data or quarterly data. Look at 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. That's the best way to convince them what the return on investment of salience is on brand volumes and growth, right? Because when that kind of debate on do we keep the budget or do we knock it off comes, rely on longer-term trending. I think that's super important. I find when I talk about rhythm, I talk about not just plans, but also training and the way you manage your teams. So in line with this kind of keep calm and keep your big brand salient thinking, the best experience I had was when we trained everyone in the organization, this was during my time at Unilever, within the business, on how brands grow. So many of you might be familiar with Byron Sharp's How Brands Grow, the whole idea of mental and physical availability. Every marketeer knows that, right? So when you take over kind of a business, you want to make sure every marketeer knows that, but don't ever stop there. I think getting your finance team to understand that, getting your supply chain partners to understand that, and to connect that to demand curves is when magic starts to happen. So I think this is that rhythm where you want to think cross-functional. You want to go big and wide across the organization. You want to think long. You want to think long-term and trend backwards in terms of how you do things. It's not just about boring stuff. It's also about being very bold. I think this rhythm is. And I love this one. I got to learn a lot about Sir Thomas Lipton, who is the founder of Lipton. And I think he's probably one of the most foremost marketeers the world has seen, right? He is a man who didn't do things quietly or shyly. He kind of did it in your face. But he had a fantastic way of making your dollars count. And he really understood the idea of consumer journeys. So he started off as a retailer in Glasgow and in many parts of the UK. And through that consumer journey, people would see sights like this. They would see elephants, pigs. He got an aeronautic engineer to rain kind of coupons on a village when he was going to open a store there. So he didn't do things quietly. There was a point when, on a big brand, we had that oh so familiar debate of do we keep the budgets or not. This was in Turkey. And what we chose to do was to run a media innovation. And this is my point about innovation. This was a time when Turkey as an economy was going through a lot of strife. There was a lot of tension in the country, and we were working on Lipton at the time. And we decided to kind of take a 5-minute media break. So we bought out that entire space just to get the country talking on 21 media channels. The kind of return on investment that got us in terms of making Lipton salient was like nothing before, right? We then became the #1 tea brand in the country, which was a fight we'd been fighting for a long time. So that's kind of rhythm number one, where you look at keeping calm, thinking big, thinking bold, and really looking at effectiveness over a longer period of time. I think rhythm two is reinventing at pace. Now, this is something that I'm sure we all aspire to do. I'd love to reinvent every single day of the year. It's tough to do. And I've found the smaller you are, the easier it is to reinvent. The bigger your company is, the bigger your brand is, the harder it is to move that machinery, right? The deeper you've got to get at listening to what people are saying. And I'll give you an example of Pukka teas that on the surface of things looked amazing, looked right. You know, we spoke to people. I distinctly remember speaking to someone in the US, a lady who talked about her husband having issues with the joints, and she was then looking for kind of joint pain remedies, chanced upon turmeric, and then wanted to buy turmeric supplements. So we thought to ourselves, well, we have a tea brand that's all about herbal ingredients, herbal goodness. You know, why would we restrict ourselves to just tea? Let's expand into supplements. I think perfectly good question to ask. And a lot of reinvention is also about changing the context of your category. You know, it made us ask ourselves, are we a tea brand or are we a health and well-being brand? And helped us to look at innovation from a different context. You know, so obviously, I mean, this sounds very obvious in hindsight, but the idea of kind of stretching across the stress and sleep kind of demand space with multiple products, the same with active, the same with women's health, and so on and so forth. We got one thing wrong. We got our rhythm wrong. It was about the time when COVID was starting to hit. You know, our supply chain teams were struggling to lift and shift huge tonnage of teas, and working with small quantities of very complex ingredients and supplements, each of them have about 31 ingredients, was very hard, you know. So we made that conscious, very tough but conscious decision to pause and then come back after a couple of years with the right insight. So I think I often kind of reflect on how important when is along with the what when it comes to innovation, and I sometimes think when is almost a little more important than the what. And this is a great example of when we did get it right with the when and the what. This again, when you think of tea, you don't really think of gifting. You do think of gifting when you think of chocolate. I think about 30% of chocolates as an industry is gifting. Coffee started to kind of pick up. Wine, absolutely yes. Flowers, hell yeah. But no, not tea. Not tea, really. And a very chance conversation with someone in Singapore, the guy that runs Grab, which is kind of like Getir and Deliveroo, et cetera, in many parts of the world, sparked this thought. It was just when COVID had hit. I think Ramadan comes around April time. And he found in Malaysia and Singapore, a lot of people were starting to gift each other Ramadan kind of meals, because the beauty of Ramadan is you get together and you break fast together, and they just couldn't meet and do that together. So they started gifting each other meals in the evening so they could virtually break fast. We thought to ourselves, what a beautiful insight. Imagine if you could gift people something more than just a tangible object, something like well-being, which is very intangible, very close to all of us. And how beautiful would that be? And that coincided with a lot of search insights around people really not liking the consumerism, the landfill of what gifting is doing around, festivals, celebratory kind of occasions like Christmas, Mother's Day, etc. Just kind of a sense of being jaded with the whole gifting scenario. And here we had the answer right in front of us. We're fully biodegradable, very, very healthy, good for you, beautiful, incredibly sensorial. You open a box of Paka and it's kind of the sensorial kind of uplift coursing through you. So we started off on that journey of gifting. And again, this created, here we got the rhythm right. Because this was a time when we could set up small teams, small squads that were cross-functional. It was super important to work with procurement and supply chain. Again, to get like those boxes going in the right space, the right costs. Super important to work with our media partners and really getting that rhythm right with a small intact team, internal and external, third parties, media. It kind of became two things. It became a huge recruitment driver for the brand. A lot of people actually came into the brand via gifting, which was interesting. We never thought of it that way. We thought gifting would drive loyalty, but no, it did the reverse. And it also created incredible equity gains because it started to bring kind of premium, sensorial, indulgent credentials to a brand that otherwise wouldn't have done all of that. So that's kind of rhythm too, right? The sense of reinventing with pace and kind of learning and relearning as you go. The third is an interesting one, and there's an element of happenstance here, right? Which is double down with focus. There's always that kind of little unsung hero within your portfolio, within your brand that hasn't got its limelight. And the whole theme of this of MadFest this time is Riders of the Storm, and every storm kind of gives you that opportunity to shift context and perspective ever so slightly. And this is an interesting one for me. This is going back to the question that I referred to earlier, this idea of, this was when I was working in ice cream in Southeast Asia. Are we an ice cream company or are we a snack? And we were Cornetto, Magnum, with many of our brands. We'd been in Southeast Asia for a long time. But usership was just not shifting. We were literally still about, I remember this interesting statistic, the per capita consumption of ice cream in Australia and New Zealand, which was also part of the region, was 12 liters per annum. So the average Aussie eats about 12 liters of ice cream. And the per capita consumption in Thailand was kind of 0.001. And a lot of the marketing programs that we were bringing into Southeast Asia were very much dessert focused. And here were countries who were snackers, right? And I'm a snacker myself, and I thought to myself, well, snacking 5 or 6 times a day makes sense. We delved into snacking in a big way and discovered an average Thai person, an average, not the highest. The average Thai person snacks 17 times a day. 17 times a day. That is absolutely crazy. But it also then gives you a sense of portion sizes and how important they are within this culture. And we did have minis within our ranges, but we very much looked at them as desserts, kind of your sofa moment. But for a culture of snackers, where people snack 17 times a day, you'd want to take those minis and put them everywhere. So we kind of went into convenience stores, we went into leisure parks, we replaced all our standard size, what we call standard size, with minis, and mini became the new standard, right? So really kind of just getting a sense of, again, when you work on big brands, to lift and shift and flex depending on the local cultural context, I think is also innovation, because it gives you that opportunity to look at your existing portfolio with a new perspective and make it work in a completely different way. This is another example. This is from India, and when in South Asia, chai is kind of made with a lot of herbs and spices typically. And the idea was to create a product initially that would make that chai making ritual or routine. It could either be a ritual or a routine, depending on whether you enjoy it or not. And it's about 15 intense minutes of kind of getting things together. So we thought, why not make things convenient? Let's put them all in a box and let people enjoy the same experience. Worked a little bit. Didn't work a lot, because a lot of people actually liked the ritual of spending that 10 minutes kind of just winding down and making their cup of chai. We got a lot of learnings. And the R&D team took the initiative to kind of create a clinical study around some of those herbs aren't commonly available herbs. So people tend to put ginger in their chai, but not everyone puts ashwagandha in it, right? Which is a very powerful herb. And we ran a clinical study that then helped us talk about health. So we took what was an everyday commodity in India and transformed it into a health drink, which sounded absolutely mental till COVID hit. And when COVID hit, when people didn't know what to do, they were looking for herbal remedies and everyday remedies, health started shifting ever so slightly, and we're seeing that shift in the world today, where health's going from finding cures to preventing. This became a €100 million business in about 12 months. So I think just kind of getting a sense of how you can reset even the most everyday product. And tea is about as everyday in India as salt is, which is probably very similar to the UK as well. And to kind of slowly start to shift that as something that can be a cup of well-being was a very interesting journey. Now, having said all of that, I think incredibly important to prioritize and calibrate. We'd all like to do all three at the same time. It's almost impossible to do all three at the same time. And in order to kind of get the right teams, the right training, the right budgets, the right conversation within the company, I absolutely hate the word annual business plans, because it just assumes that every year is going to be the same again and again and again, which we all know isn't true. Planning for that rhythm in the right way with your brands and your portfolios therefore becomes very important. And therefore this, which is bringing that rhythm of insight and introspection. And I think introspection sometimes, like meditation, is seen as something very calming, very quiet, but I think it really kind of prepares you for the best, right? I like to think of introspection as strategic meditation. Figure out what's the right time, what's the right moment in your organization to run things, and then kind of calibrate and create the rhythm yourself. I'll stop with this one. I love this chart. This is apparently what Spotify did to kind of look at how their best-selling chart busters correlate very much to the rhythm of your heartbeat. Most of the songs sit between that kind of 120 to 130 beats per minute, which apparently is how your heart beats when you're dancing or applauding. Which I thought was lovely. And I think brands find that success when when the brand teams, when the marketing teams find that rhythm within the company as well. It's something that's spoken of very less, but I think when we're all conscious of and build that muscle more often, you find success more often. So I very much believe in this idea of grooving to grow. Yeah, I think I'm bang on time.